It's only natural that if you're passionate about something, you're going to want to take that thing to the next level. And for a lot of fish keepers, that would be breeding fish. Some fish keepers will do this just for fun, and others will do this to make a profit. They look at this and they say, this is a great way to make a bunch of money real quick. Well, hold on a second. Before you get into it, here are 10 things you should know about breeding fish for profit. So you've decided to breed fish for profit, which means you're going to breed the fish, raise the fry to a sellable size, and then sell them to customers for a profit. It sounds pretty simple, right? Well, before we get into the specifics about breeding, we need to make a decision first, and that decision is going to be critical to how you approach this moving forward. That decision is, are you breeding fish to support the hobby, or are you breeding it because you want to support the family? Some fish keepers breed for fun, and maybe their fish breed by accident, and they raise those fry up and they sell those to friends or to the pet store, and they're really only doing it to make extra money to support the hobby, to buy maybe more tanks, buy food, buy chemicals, stuff like that. They're not doing it as a business. The next group of breeders is going to be people that actually want to make this into a business, something where they are breeding these fish, raising them up, and selling them for a profit to support their families. That's what we're going to focus most on in this video. But everything that we're going to talk about is pretty much going to apply to both sides. So either way you want to go, if you want to make a few dollars breeding fish, this is going to be the video for you.
How many times have you heard people say, oh my gosh, I could make a whole bunch of money on YouTube. All I have to do is make a video and I'm going to make a lot of money and I'm going to be YouTube famous. Or, breeding fish is nothing. All you have to do is stick the fish in the tank with some water, feed them. They'll do everything themselves. It's simple. Whether you're talking about YouTube or breeding fish, the pros are always going to make it look much easier than what it really is. But trust me, it's a lot of work. Unfortunately, you don't realize this until you've tried it for yourself. Breeding fish is a ton of work for the breeder, even though the fish is the one actually doing the breeding. As a fish breeder, you have to not only set up your system, but you have to maintain that system. Most fish will only breed under perfect conditions, so you gotta bust your butt to keep their water clean. Fry grow much faster when you're doing tons of water changes. And you have to think about it, you need to feed these fish a lot, so you're going to be doing a lot more water changes. So between monitoring the fish to spot breeding activity, maintaining all the tanks to be in perfect breeding or growing conditions, feeding the fish and tending to the fry so they don't get eaten by the parents, it's a ton of work, and this is only the beginning. We haven't even talked about getting rid of the fish, but that's going to be in a segment a little later. Honestly, breeding fish is not a way to make a lot of money. It is a lot of work. Yes, it's fun work, but it's still a lot of work. And it's commitment, because this is a life that you're bringing into the world.
So the best way to talk about money in fish breeding is going to be to use a particular fish as an example. Now, of course, everything here is going to change depending on what type of fish you're breeding, but for the purposes of this example, we chose to use a fish that we bred tons of and we sold tons of, and that is the albino Socolophi mbuna, or the snow white. I was going to do yellow labs, but I figured there'd be people that would say, hey, nobody really breeds yellow labs because they're everywhere, they're way too common. So anyway, let's move on. Let's say you set up a 55-gallon as your breeding tank, 4 10-gallon fry tanks, and 2 55-gallon grow-out tanks. 7 tanks total. You build racks, put inexpensive sponge filters in the tanks, and use $10 shop lights to light everything. You go totally conservative on everything. Let's say you still spend about $500 to get your system set up. You put your colony of breeders together and wait for them to breed. And let's say you get lucky and they breed right away. Let's say they have 20 fry. That's a lot. Now you have fry to raise, and you're going to spend the next 6 months feeding them 3 times a day, doing water changes multiple times per week because you want to provide the best environment possible to promote the fastest growth for those fish. Then after 6 months of this, you decide they're ready to sell, and you get lucky and sell all 20 to one guy for $8 a piece. That's $160 you made off of that batch of fish. Take that $160 and subtract food, water, and chemicals, and being generous, let's say you've got $125 left. 6 months to make $125. Do this 4 times and you might make your money back that you paid to start this whole thing up. Okay, I get it. You're not gonna only have one spawn. If you're doing this as a business, you're gonna have several broods of fry in several tanks, and you'd make a lot more money than this example. I'm just trying to put it in perspective what this stuff costs and how much you might make. This is why serious breeders who are trying to make serious money have dozens and dozens of breeder tanks and hundreds of tanks to raise the fry in. Don't expect breeding to make you rich.
Like John just said, you're gonna need several different tanks and you're gonna need several different size tanks. It's all gonna depend on what fish you're going to be breeding. You're gonna need breeding tanks, you're gonna need fry tanks, you're gonna need grow out tanks, you're just gonna need a lot of tanks. But wait a minute, aren't fry tanks and grow out tanks the same thing? No. If you throw a bunch of fry that are the size of a grain of rice into a tank with fish that are 1.5 inches long, you're basically feeding the bigger fish. In the very beginning, you need a place for the fry to grow just to get some size on them. These would be the fry tanks. We found that when we were breeding, that the 10 to 15 gallon tanks were the best to grow the fry out in. Grow out tanks are larger tanks that the fish go into once they have a bit of size to them and can fend for themselves. Our grow out tanks were 33 gallons and 55 gallon tanks, but the fish farms use ponds and vaults that are hundreds or thousands of gallons. The bigger the grow out tank, the more fish you can grow out in them. When we were breeding, we had 27 breeding tanks, and they ranged anywhere from 29 gallons all the way up to 75 gallons. We had 43 fry tanks and 57 grow out tanks, for a total of 127 tanks in our garage. Obviously, the number of tanks is going to totally depend on what fish you want to breed, how much breeding you want to do, how many fish you want to end up with, and really what can you handle. If you're breeding just for fun, like maybe to pay for fish food or something simple like that, then you're not going to need to breed a lot of fish. But if you're trying to breed fish to pay your bills, you're going to need a lot more fish tanks than you think.
If you're breeding for profit, you want to create the best product possible. And to get the best fry, you're going to need to start with the best breeder fish. Whether you're breeding African cichlids that breed in groups, South and Central American cichlids that breed in pairs, or live bearers, it doesn't matter. You're going to want to start with the best breeders possible. But where do you get those fish? Well, this is where you need to look around and talk to as many people as possible. If you're looking for an African cichlid group, find a retailer that can guarantee you that you'll get what you're asking for. What I mean is, you'll want a male and several females. You don't want to order from a place that says, I don't know, order them and then you get what you get. You're trying to make money here. Find someone who'll sell you males and females and get the ratios that you want. If you're looking to breed fish that breed in pairs, understand that these fish pick their spawning partners. You can't just buy a male and female and expect them to hit it off. Select a retailer that sells proven breeding pairs. These are fish that have already paired off and already successfully spawned. Yes, you'll pay significantly more money for proven pairs, but in the long run, you'll be better off. The best advice I can give you on buying your breeders is don't rush this. Ask around, talk to people, join Facebook groups, read reviews, find a retailer either close to you or online that makes you feel confident you're getting what you paid for. This is one of the most important parts of your business. Take your time.
How long does it take for your fish to be sellable? Well, that's a pretty common question when it comes to breeding fish and trying to sell them. The answer to that question? It depends. It depends on what type of fish you're breeding, your setup, how much you feed them, and how well you're taking care of them. If you're breeding live bears, you can probably get rid of those much quicker because they don't have to be huge to be put into a community tank. But if you're breeding cichlids, you need to have some size on them. That way they don't become fish food. Another thing to think about is who you're selling your fish to. Some people like to buy the fish really small. That way they can watch them grow and they just enjoy watching babies grow up to be adults. But if you are trying to sell to a fish store, you may have a hard time doing that just because they have a hard time turning over smaller fish because they can sell bigger fish much easier. It's a good rule of thumb to say 6 to 8 months before your fish are ready to be sold. It could be a little longer, it could be a little shorter. It just depends on all the things that we've already talked about.
There are tons of options when it comes to getting rid of your fish. If you're just starting out with this and you just want to get rid of some, you can easily place an ad on Craigslist, or you can head down to your local fish store, see if they'll take a few off your hands. But just like everything else, there's some things to think about. First is you'll make more money selling direct to the fish keeper. I'm not saying rip these people off. I'm just saying you can get retail price or close to it if you sell it direct to the consumer. If you go to your local fish store and offer to sell them fish, you have to understand they're not going to pay you more money than what they could pay their supplier that they've been dealing with for years. If the store owner pays $2 for yellow labs from the farm that he's dealing with, and you come in and offer him really nice yellow labs for $6 a piece, what do you think he's going to tell you? Now the thing is, he's probably not going to tell you how much he's paying the farm for it. That's all going to be a guarded secret, but just understand that he's probably paying a little bit less than half what he's charging the customers for his fish. So if you go into the store with a bag of yellow labs and you see that he's got yellow labs for sale for $8, understand you'll be lucky to get $4 a piece for those fish. But he might not even give you that because you have to think about it. He's been dealing with his farm for years and he doesn't even know you. So he knows what he's getting with them. He doesn't know at all what he's getting from you. So like I said, if you can get $8 a piece selling them direct to the fish keeper or $4 a piece selling them to the fish store, which one makes more sense? Well, don't answer that too quickly because the guy that comes to you responding to the Craigslist ad is probably only going to buy 1 or 2 of them, where the fish store is going to buy a dozen or so from you. So, something to think about. Lastly, if you're trying to sell direct to the consumer, there's a few ways that you can do it. We've already talked about Craigslist, but there's also things like aquarium club auctions, Facebook groups, and even websites like Aquabid that are meant specifically for posting your fish for sale. Trust me, this community is pretty tight. If you've got good fish for sale, word's gonna travel fast.
Unfortunately, if you're going to breed fish, then culling is part of the deal. Culling is getting rid of the less desirable fish. To be honest, when we bred fish, I never did it. I don't like doing it. I don't do it. Why you would cull fish is different from breeder to breeder. It could be birth defects, it could be 2 fish that weren't supposed to breed that made hybrids. When you're breeding fish that you intend to sell, you really have to be picky about it. When we had a fish store and we were breeding fish, I never tried to sell a fish that wasn't desirable, but I didn't cull my fish. I just put them in a tank and let them do their thing. They may have been a little bit shorter, they may have not looked as good, but you know what? They were my fish. I didn't try to sell them. I didn't try to make money off of them. Apparently when we were breeding fish and there were some less desirable fry that were born, John would take them and feed them to our Venustus in our breeding tank without me even knowing about it. I'm sorry, but I'm just a sucker for fish. I can't help it. Yes, it was sad, but apparently it had to be done.
I'm scared half to death.
There's several different opinions on what is the best fish to breed. If you're doing this as a business, you're going to want to breed the fish that are easy to breed, get the most fry, and super easy to get rid of. The sad reality is your favorite fish may not be everyone else's favorite fish. It's not fun to have a bunch of fish that you've bred and you have all these tanks that have those special favorite fish of yours in it and you can't get rid of any of them. It doesn't matter if you want to breed live bears, angels, discus, or African cichlids. Look around. The fish that you see everywhere are the ones you want to breed. If you see them everywhere, then obviously everybody wants them and they'll be easy to sell. Another good idea is to go to a couple of local fish stores and tell them what you plan on doing and see if they're interested in buying the fish from you. Ask them if there are any fish that they sell a lot of but they have a hard time getting in. The fish store owner might say, hey, we have a lot of people who ask about platinum angels, but we can't get them anywhere. And there you go. Now, if you decide to breed platinum angels and you can't find somebody to sell them directly to, you have a local fish store who would buy them from you. You might not make as much money selling to a local fish store, but it is something, and at least your fish is going to find a new home.
I know it might seem like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about in this video has been on the negative side, and I can assure you that is not how it was intended. Lisa and I have both said on multiple occasions that some of the most fun we have ever had as fish keepers was when we were breeding fish in 127 tanks in our garage. We would absolutely love going out there and just hanging out, just watching the fish, observing the fry and all of that. It was magical. We both absolutely loved it. When we decided that we were going to breed fish for profit, I'll be honest with you, we were a little bit naive as far as how much work it was going to be and how much money we could make. It was pretty overwhelming, so sharing all of this with you and presenting it the way we have has been in a way to help you understand the total picture of what this is really all about and what all is involved with this. I've been asked more times than I could count, John, will you ever start up another fish store? And my answer to that is no. If I was ever going to start up another fish business, it would be filling my garage full of tanks and breeding fish again, because it was some of the most fun I've ever had. We worked our butts off and we barely made any money doing it. But you know what? We loved it and it was absolutely worth it. So there you go, 10 things you should know about breeding fish for profit. We upload new episodes of 10 Things every single Sunday, so if you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, found it entertaining, why don't you consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. Thank you so much for watching, and we look forward to talking to you again next week with 10 more things.